Hi, welcome everyone to our event today, Pathways to Re-Engage Learners. My name is Natalie Brackett and I am the Learning Network Lead for ECCN, and I'm so glad you're here with us. This is a reminder that we are recording this event. Before we get started, I have a few reminders. First, auto closed captioning is available in English. Please click the CC icon to access this feature. Please use the chat feature or the Q&A function to add comments and questions whenever you like. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. To preserve bandwidth, we ask that during our plenary sessions, you mute your microphone and turn off your camera when you are not speaking. Our objectives for today's webinar are to develop and apply a deeper understanding of non-formal and alternative education programming options for children and youth, to apply learning and build connections through small group discussions centered on learner profiles, and to understand lessons learned from regional workshops in Africa and LAC. We are so lucky to be joined today by four wonderful speakers: Carmen María de Henríquez, a basic education advisor for USAID's Center for Education, and Martha Hewison, the coordinator for the INEE Accelerated Education Working Group, the AEWG, will present information on various types of non-formal programming options. Dr. Gilbert Sadsad from the Department of Education in the Philippines and Prakash Das of USAID Nepal will share insights on alternative education programs in their context. Pleased to hand it over to Carmen and Martha. Take it away.
So my name is Martha Hewison, and I'm the coordinator of the Accelerated Education Working Group from the INEE. The Accelerated Education Working Group is an interagency network made up of stakeholders working in accelerated education, and USAID is a key member. The Accelerated Education Working Group has 5 areas of focus. Our overall aim is to improve program quality for accelerated education, but we also engage directly with ministries of education, working to include accelerated education into education plans and policies. We also work to strengthen the evidence base for accelerated education. We work with stakeholders to advocate for more resources for scale and quality for accelerated education, to strengthen the resilience for learners, schools, and systems in crisis contexts, and lastly, as I said, to improve the quality. The Accelerated Education Working Group has a strong focus on localization, and we really recognize the importance of government and local ownership, and we take a systems-level approach to support policy and practice. We work with ministries and key stakeholders in countries to support capacity, strengthening through training and technical assistance, and supporting the harmonization of programs through actors. The strength and value of the Accelerated Education Working Group is our ability to convene and collaborate, and we really place an emphasis on working with others and bringing together stakeholders. This is also one of INEE's core functions. And Carmen will talk later and give you some examples of our work with this. So what we want to focus today on is terminology and why terminology matters. Why is terminology important? So often working in this area, I hear non-formal education or alternative education program terminology, such as accelerated education or catch-up, being used interchangeably. Or I often hear the same term being used differently by different stakeholders to describe different programs. And whilst we recognize and appreciate that terminology varies between countries and contexts, it's critical that when we are discussing these programs in one context or one country we all have the same understanding and are using the same names for the same programs. I'm sure all of us are clear between the difference of formal and non-formal, but when we start asking what is the difference between non-formal and informal, people already get into discussions. And so often I hear people misusing these terms. And when we start looking at all the programs within non-formal, we get into even more complexity. So today we are going to look at just 4 non-formal education programs or alternative education programs. And just to emphasize, these are not exhaustive. These are just 4 program examples to support the re-engagement of learners. And also to emphasize that the definitions we are going to look at are global definitions and they need to be contextualized. So what is accelerated education? This is the Accelerated Education Working Group global definition. So accelerated education needs to be flexible. It needs to be age appropriate. It needs to go faster, so it needs to run in an accelerated time frame. The target group are disadvantaged, over age, out of school children and youth. And the over age element here is really important. And the overall goal of accelerated education is to provide equivalent certified competencies. And also the certification element is very important in accelerated education programs. And then we emphasize that the pedagogy should match the level of cognitive maturity of these older learners. Next, if we look at catch-up programs are short-term transitional education programs, and these are for learners who were actively attending school prior to an education disruption. And these provide students with the opportunity to learn content missed during that disruption, and then engage their or support their re-engagement into the formal system. We also have bridging and remedial programs. A bridging program, again, is a short-term targeted preparation course, and it's to support students. It takes various forms such as language acquisition, or supports the differences between a home and host country curricula, for example, in forced displacement. And it supports the entry into different types of certified education. And lastly, we have remedial programs. And remedial programs is additional targeted support that runs parallel or concurrent with regular classes. And again, it's for students who require specific support on specific content or skills in order to succeed in the formal school system that they are already in. So we're going to look at a little bit more, in a little bit more detail about the learners. What's the difference between the learners for accelerated education and the learners for catch-up? So the main difference between the learners for these 2 programs is that for catch-up, it's for learners who were already attending an education program and they've missed out on a relatively short period of time. And this is opposed to accelerated education learners who have been out of school for so long that they are now over age for their grade, or they have never entered the education system. The objectives of catch-up programs compared to accelerated education programs. The objective of an accelerated education program is to gain basic literacy, numeracy, and life skills and complete normally the whole primary school curriculum, now sometimes lower secondary, and obtain a certificate and then transition into secondary school, vocational training, or livelihoods. Or when learners become the right age for the right grade, they can then transition back into the formal education system. Whereas catch-up programs focus on recovering lost learning and acquiring the skills that they missed specifically during the disruption, and then resuming their education from where they would have been if the disruption had not happened. And lastly, the coverage. What do these programs cover? So accelerated education programs cover either all of the primary school curriculum or lower primary. And more recently, we are seeing, as I mentioned, accelerated education at lower secondary level. So they cover big chunks of the curriculum, whereas catch-up programs do not cover the whole curriculum. They only cover what has been missed in the disruption. And remember that catch-up learners are learners who were in school before the disruption, whereas accelerated education program learners have spent a long time out of school. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Carmen to talk a little bit more about remedial and bridging.
Thank you, Martha. So my name is Carmen Henríquez. I work at the Center for Education with USAID in Washington, and we are seeing more projects that are focused on remediation. So we wanted to touch base and see how we can differentiate with what we are promoting as remedial education and bridging activities. Remedial education is focused on those learners that are struggling to acquire foundational skills and needs additional support in a specific area. We see this as a group or as an individual. And in the case of bridging programs, learners have previously attended school, but they were taught in a different language, or they have a different approach in the curriculum. Regarding the objectives, the keywords for remedial is that target instruction or that target support or that extra time that learners need, especially those that are struggling a little bit. And with the bridging project, as Martha was mentioning in the definition, is for children and youth that have a different curriculum or a different language of instruction. We can see this in migration situations. When a family with children migrates to a different country, that has a different native language. Regarding the coverage, we're seeing more on how remediation is working in a group of learners by levels. So this is the coverage. It can be individual or can be in a group. And for the bridging projects, we also are seeing that learners need that transition to the formal education. So we're bringing bridging programs to those learners that are in need to transition to the formal education. So now everyone is confused with all this terminology because we have so many alternative programs. I'll let Martha explain a little bit from her experience on real cases in governments and countries trying to solve this confusion for everyone. Over to you, Martha.
Thank you, Carmen. I hope that we will succeed. So I think it's really interesting to hear all these program descriptions, but it's really critical when working with stakeholders, and especially with ministries of education, but all stakeholders, that we have the same understanding of the terminology we're using. And that sounds like something so simple, but it really isn't. And in order to target the correct programs to match the learners' needs and demands, we all have to understand which programs target which learners for learners to be successful. And I can give three recent examples where we're struggling with this. So currently we're working to support Gaza, and the education response plan developed by the Cluster for Gaza mentions the need for accelerated education and catch-up. But in the in the emergency response plan, or the ERP, there's no definitions of accelerated education or catch-up. And this is already proving difficult. So when partners are sharing multiple programs to respond to the loss of learning, we don't know whether we're all talking about accelerated education or catch-up, but because we haven't got a definition, we're not sure if we're talking about the same programs. And we also have not done a really good assessment of learners in order to know which learners are appropriate for which programs. So it's really critical at the beginning to contextualize these definitions so that when we're talking about accelerated education, when we're talking about catch-up, when we're talking about remedial, we're all talking about the same thing. We're also just about to embark on some research with an academic institution on accelerated education in Mozambique. And in their research proposal, the focus is on accelerated education. But again, it hasn't been defined. So we cannot be sure that when partners are all talking about accelerated education, they're all talking about the same program. Because in Mozambique, there's several different accelerated education programs that uses different curriculums that target different learners. So when the researchers compare data, they may find that the learners from one accelerated education programs are in fact a very different set of learners with different backgrounds and different durations of missed education than another group, but they're all doing an accelerated education, because even though everyone is calling it accelerated education, potentially it's really a catch-up program. And so therefore these learners are not comparable, their learning outcomes are not comparable, so you really can't compare these programs. And this was a major finding in a study done several years ago. I think it was in 2016, 2017, and it was done by the University of Chicago, and they were comparing accelerated education programs globally. And one of the main findings of that study was that there was so much differentiation between what was called accelerated education that actually they couldn't compare them. And my last example is from the Global Education Cluster. Again, we are working with them to support them to develop their indicators. And they have an indicator in their humanitarian response plan for non-formal education. And I'm going to read it to you. So the education sector refers to alternative education, including NFE, technical and vocational education and training, TVET and/or accelerated education programs, including but not limited to the following words: accelerated learning, ALP, accelerated education, AEP, remedial, catch-up education, bridging, alternative, and non-formal. So cluster coordinators are often using these terms synonymously, and this doesn't allow an accurate analysis of the various types of non-formal education programs targeting the various learners. It only shows that non-formal education broadly is featured in the HRP. So the Accelerated Education Working Group has developed several useful tools to help you with this. There's two tools here. So one on my left is the program table, which really shows the difference in learners, content, and objectives, and we presented this. And the other one is the key program definitions. And I want to emphasize that these are global definitions that need to be contextualized. The Accelerated Education Working Group has also developed a framework for accelerated education. And these are the 10 principles for effective practice. The principles aim to clarify the essential components of any effective accelerated education program. And while the long-term goal should be to meet all of the principles, we recognize it won't happen immediately and will involve the requirements, will involve the many different actors and the coordination of many different actors. But in considering the application of the principles, we need to recognize that these principles are aspirational They should not function as minimum standards. They need to be contextualized, and there also are inherent tensions between the principles and some of the action points. And the 10 principles are really great as a foundation for program design, program quality, program implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. And we also have a whole guide to the principles. We have a checklist for the principles. And I think it's really a useful tool to check how your program is aligning with global good practice. And we also developed a set of principles for catch-up programs. This was in response to COVID-19, but they're also applicable to catch-up programs in general. And we recognized that there was very little available guidance for catch-up programs. So they take the same structure as the accelerated education program principles, but they're specifically for catch-up. And lastly, you can find all the AWG tools and resources on the INEE website. You can scan the QR code or go to the link. And if you have any questions, my contact is at the bottom. So I'd like to pass you back to Natalie and say thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Martha and Carmen, for providing that important context and terminology around non-formal education. We have a few minutes here to pause, reflect, take questions from our participants. So please feel free to add any questions you might have to the chat, use the Q&A function, or come off mute to ask your question verbally. Wow, this must have been very thoroughly explained. The terminology is crystal clear. Not seeing anything in the chat, we'll give another moment or two for anyone who would like to ask questions to Martha or Carmen. Can we have the presentation materials I see in the chat? I do believe we will have follow-up with the recording of this session, any links that we are sharing throughout the presentation available for you, coming probably directly to your inbox, although Lauren, do correct me if I'm wrong on that. If you are registered and attending today, we will be following up with you. Well, wonderful. It seems that our introduction and terminology has landed firmly in folks' heads. Yes, lots to digest indeed. Very, very helpful explanations and many wonderful resources from the AEWG and INEE. We will head on to some examples. I'd love to introduce next Dr. Gilbert Sadsad, who will tell us about a regional initiative in the Philippines.
Thank you very much. Good day, everyone. I am Gilbert Sadsad, the Regional Director of the Department of Education, Region 5, one of the 17 regions in the Philippines. Thank you for the invitation to present our regional initiative, the 8-week Learning Recovery Curriculum, a reading remediation program we developed in 2022. The COVID-19 pandemic compelled the Philippines to implement educational adjustments, the Bicol region included. Compared to other countries in the East and Southeast Asia, the Philippines had one of the longest school closures, going from March 2020 to October 2021, without any type of formal classes. We implemented a pilot run of limited face-to-face classes in November 2021 after a 20-month school closure, and only returned to full face-to-face classes for public schools on November 2, 2022. Private schools were allowed to continue blended in and distance learning. About 27 million students in the Philippines have been affected by partial or full school closures. Because of this, 9 out of 10 children fell below the minimum reading proficiency level. In Region 5, we were particularly concerned about the reading ability of our early grade learners due to long school closures and the implementation of distance learning. To determine the actual number of our learners who have not acquired the foundational literacy skills, we conducted a literacy assessment in 2022, the Comprehensive Rapid Literacy Assessment, which we developed with the support of ABC Plus project. The results revealed that more than half of our early grade learners could not read or they were full refreshers. Some could read, but still with reading difficulties. These left only a measly 27% of grade 1 to 3 learners who could read in 2022. The situation prompted us to implement a learning recovery program through Project RACE, or Recovering for Academic Achievement, by improving instruction through sustainable evidence-based learning programs. The main focus of this learning recovery program is the implementation of the 8-week learning recovery curriculum for 3 years. By 2025, our region visualizes a classroom where every reader or every learner is a reader and numerate. We are currently implementing this cohesive and needs-based reading program for 3 school years. We want to make sure that we are promoting early grade learners who have fully recovered from learning loss and are able to acquire critical foundational literacy skills that will help them learn their lessons well in school because they are able to comprehend. The 8-week learning recovery curriculum is an intervention that aims to recover learning loss among our early grade learners. The instruction focuses on the teaching of foundational skills in literacy and numeracy for grades 1, 2, and 3. The 8-week learning recovery curriculum is implemented at the beginning of the school year as soon as classes open. Inside this contextualized curriculum, a pretest is conducted in week 1. Lessons on literacy and numeracy are conducted in weeks 2 to 8, and a post-test is given in week 10 to assess learners' progress. This means that within this period, the teaching of regular lessons in the different subject areas are temporarily suspended to make way for the implementation of the 8-week contextualized curriculum. It's only after its culmination that the early grade teachers will start the regular lessons. By this time, most of the learners, if not all, have already acquired literacy skills that they need to learn their lessons well. We are seeing progress in terms of the number of learners who can read. from the measly 27.13% in 2022, it climbed to 33.36% in 2023. And at the beginning of school year 2023-2024, we posted a 49.79% mark. The graph also shows that we are seeing a decrease in the number of early grade learners in Region 5 who could not read. From 50.80% in 2022, it decreased to 36.51% in 2023, and this year to 22.27%. The progress that we have made in Region 5 can be attributed to the collaborative efforts that we have exerted as a cohesive organization focused on addressing the learning crisis that we are confronted with. As leaders, we need to be agile in order to shape the mindset of our people down the line. We are also grateful to our external partners, education leaders in the field, and our teachers because courageously take on the responsibility of carrying out their tasks. There is a high ownership across the different governance levels in Region 5 because we understand why we have to implement drastic measures to address learning loss among our early grade learners. We all share that vision of equipping our learners with what they need so that they can be better individuals and eventually productive citizens of our country. If there is one thing that we have learned as a region implementing an out-of-the-box and courageous initiative, it is this. Learning recovery will not happen overnight. One-time, big-time intervention will not work. It should start with an understanding what a learner can and cannot do. Initiatives on learning recovery need thorough planning, efficient implementation, persistent monitoring to gather feedback, regular revisions and adjustments, careful evaluation and a collective heart of an organization to continue moving forward with a common goal in mind. Let every learner read and change their life for the better. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sadsad. Next, we will hear from Prakash Das from USAID Nepal.
Namaste, my name is Prakash Das, Equity and Inclusion Education Specialist with the USAID Nepal Mission. The Breakthrough Action Reducing Child Early and Forced Marriage project primarily focused on strengthening the institutional and technical capacity of the local government, on child protection system and changing societal norms to reduce child early and forced marriage. Initially, the project did not have specific interventions planned for remedial education programs. We added a third objective to the project, focused on improving learning outcomes for adolescent girls through non-formal education that would lead to school retention and reduction in child early and forced marriage rates. The COVID-19 pandemic-related school closures in 2020 or 2021 for an extended period could have worsened that problem, with a real danger that adolescent girls, particularly from marginalized populations, were more likely to drop out of school permanently and be at an increased risk of child early and forced marriage. Remedial education was implemented post-COVID in 2022 after schools had closed for long durations. There were fears of children having fallen behind, especially those already performing poorly prior to COVID, unable to catch up and would drop out from the school. Madhya province has one of the highest rate of child early marriage among the 7 provinces in Nepal. If you can see this map, the Madhya province is situated in the southern belt of Nepal, near the border of India. The remedial education program was implemented in 2 districts of Madhya province, within 5 local government in Mohantere district and 4 local government in Rautarhat district. In total, 83 schools across the 9 local governments were targeted for a remedial education program. The selection criteria for school selections were poor enrollment rate, high dropout rate, no development organization working on remedial education programs. The remedial education engaged students, parents, and teachers to increase learning outcomes, academic performance for adolescent girls as well as boys from marginalized communities, so they could stay in school after long school closures due to COVID-19 pandemic. The project took 5 approaches. Similarly, like if you can see in the slides, like remedial classes, bursary support, life skill sessions were provided, counseling services to the students, and positive parenting sessions were done. Under remedial classes, the remedial education program, we trained 357 teachers, out of which male were 297 and female 60, from grade 6 to 8 of 83 schools within these 9 local municipalities. Total 270 remedial classes sessions for struggling learners from grade 6 to 8 were provided, and each session were provided 25 sessions per each subject were provided in a subject like Nepali, English, maths, and science. In addition to that, 10 life skill sessions were also provided to the students. The session format were provided 2 hours a day and 6 days a week. The instruction model that was followed was gradual release and scaffolding model. Similarly, under bursary support, were provided to 7,800 students that included school bags, books, self-learning materials, school dress, and other stationery items for the students. Similarly, under the life skill sessions, 12 life skill sessions were delivered on self-awareness, effective communication, relationship building, critical and creative thinking, emotional and stress management, decision making, and problem solving through trained remedial facilitation every weekend. Like on Saturday, they were given it to the students. Under counseling services, psychosocial first aid sessions were provided to all of the adolescent girls and boys attending the remedial classes. Children were provided with need-based individual as well as group counseling support by a trained counselor. Under parenting sessions, the project rolled out positive parenting sessions, reaching approximately 8,000 parents to sensitize parents on their roles in their children's education as well as how they can take care of the overall well-being of their children. Parenting sessions cover topics like managing stress, developing relationships with their children, to support on their education, along with regular parent-teacher interaction. All these approaches were done in very close consultation, collaboration with the local government education stakeholders. Similarly, teachers were provided training, but also with additional support were provided like coaching and mentoring from the school leaderships. Regular intervention monitoring were done while implementing these 5 approaches. If you can see in this slide, the majority of boys and girls had improved reading skills in science and math from baseline to the endline assessment. You can see that there was no significant difference in performance between boys and girls. The average scores has increased significantly through the endline after it was done from the baseline to the endline. But you can see that the highest score were in the math and the science subjects. There was significant grade-wise learning achievements with improvement in test scores from baseline to the endline. Changes in scores from baseline to endline for class 6, 7, and 8, and overall were statistically significant for each subject as well as overall grades also. As shown in the graph, you can see in the graph like there was a very significant, statistically significant improvement in these learning on these different subjects. Also note that there was variation in the improvement we saw across the local municipalities with improved performance among students enrolled and reduced dropout in all the targeted municipalities. Similarly, a qualitative, most significant change in assessment was done to identify the factors that contributed to the success of the remedial education program and to understand the local perspective on remedial education. The evaluation participants identified key additional changes, such as, if you can see, the first one is the program remedial education session and methods were provided. And the additional changes that we saw from the study was increased interest, motivation, and self-confidence in school, improved understanding in school, increased importance placed on education, and improved attitude, awareness, and knowledge related to preventing child marriage and continuing the girls' education. These changes were noteworthy for both students and parents. According to participants, these changes led to the behavioral changes, improving the school attendance and dedicated more time for studying, that ultimately improved students' educational performance. So the overall learning that we got from this remedial education program was remedial classes, even short duration, it was for 4 months, can lead to a better learning outcomes. End of the academic year, remedial intervention could be more effective as it contributes to the better terminal exam preparation. Similarly, parental engagement is very critical as it leads to increased interest, motivation in school, increased importance placed on education that helps children get motivated to study. Also, we found that improved instruction through on-site coaching, mentoring, and support that was provided to teachers, and also enjoyable classes for students with teachers paying individual attention and supporting them. Additionally, we also saw that the smaller class sizes, like for remedial education intervention, it was 30 students per class, while the normal class sizes are 100 plus students in Madhya province. That's also one of the critical findings that we saw. So all these learnings that we learned from the remedial education program initiative contributed to the national recovery and accelerated and learning real plan 2023-2020 of Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, Nepal. And if you want to read the detailed full reports, you can scan the QR code. Thank you for listening. Over to Natalie.
Thank you so much, Prakash, and to Dr. Sadsad as well. Once again, we do have some time for questions. I will pull from the chat in the order that I've seen those, but of course, again, please feel free to also add verbal questions as we move through these. Amy, I saw your question come through during Prakash's presentation. Prakash, I believe this is for you then. Are the teachers of the accelerated remedial or bridging program the same teachers as students' classroom teachers? Who is expected to deliver the program?
Yes, I think it was the same teachers who were volunteered, who were interested to volunteer as a remedial education teacher also, but it was after the regular classes or before the regular classes.
Wonderful. Thanks, Prakash. And Amy, again, feel free to come off mute or to ask any follow-ups as needed. Seeing also in the chat from Pimba, how was the assessment conducted to measure learning outcomes? Prakash, I believe that is also directed towards you.
Yeah, thank you, Pemba. For the assessment, a set of baseline questions were designed to assess student knowledge in subjects like Nepali, English, math, and science. The tests were graded by teachers at participating schools. The same set of questions were administered to students during the endline assessment after they completed the remedial classes. Both these data were entered for the baseline and endline assessment and analyzed to generate aggregate scores as well as subject-specific scores. So the scores were based on the grading system that is administered by the government of Nepal. So we used the standard tool that government of Nepal used. And you can say it was like kind of a longitudinal study that we followed all the students to see those changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Prakash. I'm gonna forgive me Bisharat, I'm gonna quickly get a question in for Dr. Sadsad here. This is from Anil. Are there lessons for the Bangsamoro? Forgive me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. It appears the BOL and BARMM have been halted. Dr. Sadsad, I don't know if you have better familiarity than I do with the acronyms here.
Good afternoon. Honestly,
It's the
am
same
not
file.
familiar.
It's a different
Hello.
file.
Sorry.
I am not familiar about what about Bangsamoro or the BOL. I'm sorry to say this, but I cannot respond to that.
Oh, no worries. Anil, if you're able to provide any other details in the chat, please do feel free to spell those out for us. We would love to address your question. I am seeing some raised hands. Thank you, my lovely, polite participants, for signaling you might have some questions verbally. Ananda, I'll call on you first.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Ananda from Nepal, so from USAID Early Learning Project. Basically, I'm very much excited to know more about this Philippines experience regarding this recovery of learning. So one of the things that I'd like to know more about what type of teachers support systems that you have, implemented to accomplish the goal of this learning recovery. So that's the one part. And second is that do you have any, the intervention and initiated in parental engagement? So these are the two things that we are also, still, struggling with. So your learning will be very crucial and helpful for us. Over to you.
Prakash, if you're providing your answer, I'm sorry, you're still muted.
No, it is on, in case of it is Philippines, I think so. Learning from the Philippines.
Okay.
That would be good.
Dr. Sadsad, you were also muted.
Yeah, thank you very much. Am I heard?
Yes, you are clear now.
May I ask if what's the question? Can you repeat?
Yes, definitely teacher support systems. What type of support systems that you have used in order to implement this recovery of learning? So that is one question. And second is that have you also, they implemented some parental scheme in order to promote this, learning recovery? These are the two concerns that I would like to know more about.
I don't know if I'm correct in what I heard, but if you are talking about the teachers that we involved in the remedial or in the 8-week learning recovery curriculum that we formulated, we involved grades 1, 2, and 3 teachers in the first in the development of the CRLA, the Comprehensive Rapid Literacy Assessment Tool, together with the ABC Plus project, which is supported by USAID, and of course some supervisors and some key officials of the Department of Education in the crafting of the tool. We also involved the leaders of the different divisions. In Bicol region, we have 13 schools division offices. We involved the head, the superintendent, the assistant superintendents, the chief, and other teachers in the crafting of the learning recovery program of their respective divisions. And we gathered them all, and we come up with a shared vision, and we come up with the 8-week learning recovery program. So with that, this is being implemented in all the schools in Bicol region in grades 1, 2, and 3. And the assessment was also done by the teachers teaching the grades 1, 2, and 3. So temporarily, as I presented, there was suspension of the regular subjects, teaching of regular subjects like Philippine, like science and others, Araling Panlipunan or social studies. They focus for 1 quarter, which is 10 weeks or 8 weeks for in the teaching of literacy and numeracy. So that's what we've done here in Bicol region relative to the implementation of our 8-week learning recovery curriculum. I hope I got the question clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sadsad. I believe, Lauren, correct me if we don't have time for one more question here. I do want to pull. Oh, go ahead, Lauren.
Nope, just, yeah, we have a couple more minutes.
Great. We'll pull from the chat here. Thank you so much, Tracy, for this question. This is perhaps open to any of our wonderful speakers. It seems like a generalized question regarding curriculum development for accelerated education programs. Are accelerated programs required by ministries of education and then adapted for specific situations? Does USAID or UNESCO or other entities is a framework provided?
I can jump and respond. Definitely, we work closely as USAID. We work closely in the countries that we work on. And we work closely with the ministries of education to provide some type of certification on accelerated education, but also with remedial and catch-up and bridging project. We really work with the education system in the host countries. Regarding a framework, Martha shared the Accelerated Education Working Group framework and principles that we're trying to promote, because this has been validated by a group of local and international entities, and they came with the 10 principles on accelerated education. Martha, I don't know if you want to comment additional to this part. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I think it's a really important question. And in our principles, principles 9 and 10 really talk about the importance of ensuring that the curriculum is aligned with the national education curriculum and is certified. So what we really promote, and I think in the last, I'd say, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, accelerated education programs often used to have curriculums developed by NGOs or UN agencies, which weren't aligned with national curriculums. And I think there's been a real change and real advocacy. And so now we really promote that all accelerated education programs, curriculums ideally should be developed by the National Curriculum Development Center. They should be totally aligned, and learners should actually take the same, or if not the equivalent, but the same primary school leaving exam and result in recognized certification. So the alignment of the curriculum is super important and should be led by the Ministry of Education, ideally.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carmen and Martha, for jumping in. Thank you again, Dr. Sadsad and Prakash, for your wonderful presentations. Actually, Carmen and Martha are back up again here to lead us into a small group activity.
So thank you very much for the presentations, because that's a clear explanation on how countries are moving forward with remediation programs. Now we need to move to practice. Now we will have time to share among the participants and to really talk about how countries are fitting into the definitions that we started talking at the beginning. In this session, we will have the opportunity to learn from different learners' profile and identify an appropriate accelerated alternative program which best fits into the needs of each learner. As you have heard, accelerated education is for all out-of-school children, but also for learners that are in school. The Accelerated Education Working Group has created a decision tree that you will have the opportunity to review and discuss from your experiences. We will now look at several profiles, and you will have the opportunity to fit into the alternatives that we were talking at the beginning, whether the best project will be to provide remedial education or catch up or accelerated education or bridging alternative. We will be divided in small groups. Each group will be identified by a number. Please use the same number to discuss the learner's profile. You can identify a facilitator and a note taker. In your small groups, please review, please read the profile and use the decision tree to determine which program is most suitable fit for this individual. Discuss reasons and justify why you arrived to the group decision. You will have 15 minutes to discuss and complete this task. If a group reaches a decision, there's additional questions that you can consider. For example, which additional factors or supports this learner will need, and who else might require support. I don't know, Lauren, you will divide the groups in small breakout rooms?
Yes, I have those ready to go. And again, you should, when the breakout room pops up, note the number of that breakout room, and that's going to correspond to your group number. And there's a link in the chat, a Google document with those learner profiles. So I'm going to open those now. We should all be back, Martha, if you want to take it from here.
Great, thank you. So I hope that you found that activity helpful, and I hope that you managed to place your learner into the appropriate program. I joined two rooms. I joined room number 2 and room number, excuse me, room number 4. And there was a lot of useful discussion. But I think the activity is really to demonstrate that learners have different demands and require different programs to succeed. And research research often shows, and in my experience, especially a lot of the places I work, that when we have learners that are out of school, non-formal education or alternative programs are offered, and it's normally only one program to meet the demands of all these out-of-school children and youth. And they're looked at as one homogeneous group. And often it's examples like accelerated education for all out-of-school children and youth, or TVET programs for all youth. And as we've demonstrated, we need different programs for different learners who have missed out on different durations of education. And not enough attention is paid for the reasons that these learners are out of school. So these learners who are struggling or for a variety of reasons have dropped out of school really need specific programs to meet their specific needs and demands. And whilst we all understand that we are limited in providing programs to meet all the needs of all the learners, I think it's really important that we take a more nuanced approach, and the assessment of learners and the assessment of the context needs to be done thoroughly before providing programs for these out-of-school children and youth. And this is really a prerequisite for learners to be successful in these programs. So I really hope that activity was just a taster, but to try and be a little bit more nuanced and really to think about the different learners and the different programs, and not just providing one program for all of these out-of-school children and youth. I'll hand over to my colleague Carmen again, who's just going to talk about some examples of the work the Accelerated Education Working Group has done at a regional level. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you, Marta. And it's interesting how USAID has been working closely with the Accelerated Education Working Group. Recently, maybe you can move to the next slide. Recently, we developed a very interesting workshop for the Black region, in which 8 countries in the region participated, representatives from the Ministry of Education, different local and international organizations, UNESCO, UNICEF. You can see all the logos. We had a huge representative from local entities as well. And this workshop really had an interesting discussion on what we have tried to do today, on trying to define the different programs, trying to identify the learners' needs, but also creating action plans per country. This workshop was led by Martha and a group of experts, and we had like facilitators moving into this process. We had over 80 representatives, and this is something that the Accelerated Education Working Group has already done in the Africa region, and last year we did it in the LAC region. What are the next steps? We will be finalizing a final report. We will continue the support to the countries, and we hope that for the Asia region, there's interest of trying to do this type of workshops with some of the countries that represent the region. For last, we wanted to present a video that the Colombia ministry has developed, trying to show how flexible accelerated education programs really fit into that country. Thank you very much for your participation, and we want to present that video. Over.
En Colombia, los programas de educación acelerada se enmarcan dentro de los modelos educativos flexibles. Estos modelos surgen en los años 70 para garantizar la inclusión y permanencia educativa de niños, niñas y jóvenes en condición de vulnerabilidad por desplazamiento, migración, extraedad u otras situaciones que dificultan su ingreso y permanencia en la escuela. Los modelos educativos flexibles de aceleración están dirigidos a niños, niñas y jóvenes en extraedad que hayan interrumpido su educación o que nunca hayan asistido a la escuela. La diferencia entre la edad que tienen y la edad que deberían tener para el grado en el que están, lo que se conoce como extraedad, sumada a brechas en competencias básicas y afectaciones socioemocionales, es una barrera significativa para que reingresen a la escuela y continúen con su educación. Estos modelos hacen posible nivelar en un año el equivalente a 2 o 3 grados escolares, permitiéndoles a los estudiantes seguir en la escuela o transitar hacia oportunidades de medios de vida según su edad. En Colombia, los modelos educativos flexibles hacen parte de la educación formal. El Ministerio de Educación es el encargado de brindar orientaciones técnicas sobre los modelos educativos flexibles y las secretarías de educación municipales o departamentales se encargan de la implementación. Existen diferentes modelos educativos flexibles que son específicamente de educación acelerada. Entre ellos están horizontes con brújula para el aprendizaje, aceleración del aprendizaje, caminar en secundaria 1 y 2 y pensar. Estos modelos cubren y permiten nivelar todos los grados, posibilitando que los estudiantes en extraedad completen su trayectoria educativa. El hecho de que en Colombia los modelos sean educación formal y que cubran todos los tramos de la trayectoria educativa permite avanzar hacia la garantía del derecho a la educación de la población en extraedad. Pese a los avances y fortalezas de la educación acelerada en Colombia, también existen retos. Por un lado, el sistema educativo colombiano es descentralizado. Además, existe una amplia multiplicidad de modelos y de actores que los implementan. Esto hace difícil que haya un trabajo armonizado entre sectores y que haya un seguimiento, monitoreo y reporte sistemático de la implementación de modelos educativos flexibles, de su cobertura y sus resultados. Por otra parte, en términos de cobertura, hay mucho camino por recorrer, pues la mayor parte de la población en extraedad no está siendo atendida en un modelo, sino en un aula regular. Esto puede generar retos en el aprendizaje, dificultades de adaptación y deserción. Para hacerle frente a los retos, en 2022 se creó un grupo de trabajo de modelos educativos flexibles, integrado por 20 entidades públicas, privadas y de cooperación. El objetivo del grupo es fortalecer la implementación de los modelos, promoviendo el trabajo articulado entre actores y sectores. Este grupo se articula con el Grupo de Trabajo de Educación Acelerada de la Red Interagencial para la Educación en Situaciones de Emergencia. El grupo ha tenido logros importantes, como articular organizaciones implementadoras, financiadores y secretarías, y hacer visible a los modelos educativos flexibles como una oportunidad de atención adecuada para la población en extraedad. El grupo continúa sumando esfuerzos en beneficio de la calidad de la educación acelerada en Colombia.
I just wanted to share 3 takeaways from this video. First, the unique role of the Ministry of Education in gathering all the flexible modalities, but at all levels of education, starting from primary, secondary, and up to high school. I think that's very unique. Second, the role of different stakeholders. By creating this network, there's an opportunity for coordination between local entities, international organizations, all working together for out-of-school children and youth, but also working with those learners that are struggling. And third, the decentralization piece, in which provides opportunity for local entities to provide their services in non-formal education, but also at the formal education. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it to Natalie. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Prakash and Dr. Sadsad. And thank you, participants, for your engagement, for your participation in our activity, and for learning together here today. I hope that you are also a member of ECCN already. If you are not, please do scan the QR code to join our network and to join future events on equally exciting topics, and I'm sure more to come on the topic of accelerated education. Thank you all again for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your day.